Supreme Court, this pending decisions that are making their way through the lower courts. For more, let's go to Washington and Josh Blackman, professor of law at South Texas College of Law. Thank you for being with us here on France 24.
Thank you.
The Supreme Court handing a provisional victory to Donald Trump. How is it working for these six countries?
So as it stands now, if you're an alien from these six majority Muslim nations, the government of the United States can deny you entry. The Supreme Court's ruling, though, is only in effect until the justices resolve the case in its final form. So we may not see this until June of 2018, a final decision. But for at least the next 6 or 7 months, the president does have the authority to implement this policy.
It was a 7-2 decision with the two most liberal judges on the court who voted against. What does that give us any idea of how they'll vote when it comes to the big one?
So we should avoid reading too much into this preliminary judgment nation. But more likely than not, when a justice votes to allow the policy to go into effect temporarily, that's also a signal that they will eventually let it go into effect permanently. So unless there are several changes of heart on the court, this is a pretty good victory for President Trump.
Now, critics say that this is discrimination on religious basis. The Trump administration denies. Josh Blackman, is this constitutional?
I've argued for some time that this policy is lawful and it is constitutional. And the fact that only 2 justices dissented from this order bolsters that position. If indeed this policy was tainted by anti-Muslim animus, it's very unlikely the court would have allowed it to go into effect at all. But that's not what happened. The court greenlighted Trump to go ahead with this.
It does seem random, though. How do you explain that citizens of Chad, for instance, are barred from coming?
Well, Chad is an unusual addition to the list precisely because Chad is an ally of the United States in the war on terror. What the government explained in their memorandum is that the Chad government doesn't provide accurate verification of identity, that a person is who they say they are. And it's entirely feasible that in 6 months or so, Chad comes off the list. This list is not set in stone. But we can argue why this country, why that country. The bottom line is that in the sphere of foreign policy, the executive gets a lot of latitude in deciding who can and cannot be admitted. And the Supreme Court's decision yesterday, I think, reaffirms that conclusion.
We remember the outrage when the first travel ban went into effect. It seems as though the reaction has softened. Josh Blackman, does that say that the United States is changing when it comes to its attitude towards immigrants?
Well, more than the attitude, the policy itself changed. This is actually the 3rd iteration of the travel policy. And with each iteration, it's gotten more sound, more grounded, and more narrowly tailored. At this point, there was a lengthy government study performed, and this wasn't some sort of arbitrary policy issued a couple days after the inauguration. So I think more than any views in immigration policy changing, I think what we've seen is that justices recognize that the government's taking this policy seriously, and there is a legitimate basis behind it.
Josh Blackman of South Texas College of Law, many thanks for speaking with us.